Okay, so what we are doing today is Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. We're finishing, but we are doing to make some tests Vav Amud Aleph. We're doing effectively today a little bit of tests Menachas, get a flavor for Kachim. We're continuing the discussion that we had yesterday in relation to the Mishnah. The Mishnah told us that the woman, when she came up to the Beis Hamikdash with her husband, so Hayam Mevi, right? He brought es minchasa, her mincha. As Rashi noted, Hayam Mevi es minchasa, Rashi in the Mishnah, Habal, the husband brought it. It has ramifications that we won't have time to start to discuss right now, but her mincha is brought by him. Okay, so continues the Gemara here on Yudal and the base, about 15 lines down. So we're up to the next part of this Mishnah. It's after that was brought. It was in V'naistan Klisharis and Mekadsha B'Klisharis. So they took the amounts of flour, oil, etc., whatever it was that the carbon mincha that it is typically made of, and you put it into the Klisharis, and it becomes Kodesh in the Klisharis. So the Gemara says, Shamas Mina, it sounds like from this that what? Klisharis ein mekanshin elamidas. That the Klisharis works and makes something kadosh, but only does it midas. That is, when you put it into Klisharis, you had intention. Look at Rashi over here. Ve'ein mekanshin elamidas. Rashi says, shehaneisnai behen tzarich sheyitenen l'shem kach. Right? They had intention, and when you put it into Klisharis, it becomes kadosh. So now Rashi asks a question, not so typical of Rashi, right? Rashi says, but why are we saying that there's a havamina that maybe the klisharis only becomes making something kodesh? If you have intention, hare mincha kedusha v'emedes, isn't there already a kedusha here? She'ekdusha b'peh. Don't you have kedusha sapeh? Isn't that already making this thing kodesh? And if that's the case, then why are we talking about the kedusha of the klisharis? On that, Rashi answers that there's a difference between the kedusha sapeh, that this thing is, that you've taken the flour and the oil and all that, and you made a kedusha sapeh on it. There's a difference between that and the kedusha that one has when one makes something into the klisharis, which gets at a kedusha saguf. And that is, when something is just a kedusha sapeh, it's as though it's finished, right? I'm sorry, when something is a kedusha saguf, it's finished. If it becomes tameh, and if there's no pidyon, it's over. But a kedusha peh, there's room to maneuver, there's room to wiggle. So it's true that there's a kedusha peh on this flour and oil, etc. But that's not the highest level. The highest level is the kedusha saguf, which only happens after it gets into klisharis. So the havamin of the Gemara is that Shamas Minah Klisharis Ein Mekanshin El Midas. We're not saying that there's no kedusha here. The Havin of the Gemara understands there is a kedusha, but the kedusha that's there is only kedusha's apeh. It's not a kedusha like that. You're only going to get into Klisharis. Now the Gemara is asking, so this flour and oil which has a kedusha's apeh sounds like it only gets a kedusha aguf if you intentionally put it into the Klisharis. But if you don't intentionally put it into the Klisharis, then it retains a kedusha apeh, and it doesn't get a kedusha aguf. On that, the Gemara answers no. Ema neisna b'chlisharis, the kasha b'chlisharis. When you read that line there, when it says neisna v'neisna l'toich klisharis umekadsha b'chlisharis, don't read it. So you put it into the klisharis and you are mekadesh it in the klisharis, which sounds like there is an intention requirement. Don't read it that way. Rather, how should you read it? Ema noisna b'klisharis, and put in a lamed, right? Instead of the instead of the vav, right? Instead of the umikacha, now the lashon is likacha. You put it into the klisharis in order to make it kaddish. That is to say, it happens me'elav. Once you put it into the klisharis, it gets a kedusha saguf. You don't need to have intention to give it the kedusha saguf. And that's Rashi says, noisna likacha atayra hitzrichus to litna b'klisharis. Once the Torah mandates putting into the klisharis, So that the Kli Sharis will be Mekadosh it. But I feel even if you have no intention about it, it will nevertheless happen, Me'ilov. Good. So continues the Gemara. So what's the next process there that the Tosefta had said? Once it's in the Klisharis and has the Klush Haguf now from the Klisharis. So then it said, "V'noisten aleh shemen u'levayna." Right? You put on it the oil and the incense. So how do we know? Shne'emar v'yotzak aleh shemen v'nosten aleh levayna. Where you take the flour, you put now on it oil, and you put on incense. That says in pasuk. So you're asking me, what's the source? It's the procedure. The Torah says all the parsha of the mincha. So it says pasuk. So now once you have this flour, oil, incense mixture in the klishares, so what's the next step? Melich etzel kain. Right, you bring it to the kain. Again, the pasuk said the siv al b'nei Aaron. And then what is the next step after that? The kohen melich etzel mizbeach, and the kohen brings it to the mizbeach. Tichsev v'yigish etzel mizbeach. Again, all these are the basic reading of the psukim that the Tosefta is basing itself on. And then now we get to something that's a little bit more complicated. So the Tosefta continued that what Magisha bekaren droimis ma'aravis, you bring in the southwestern corner keneged chudash al karen v'daya. You bring it next to the southwestern corner of the mizbeach, opposite the horn of the mizbeach, v'daya, and that's sufficient. That's good. So now the Gemara wants to know, what does it mean? Minolan. Right. We want to understand, why is this. So before we go any further, I'll just show you. I have a diagram that I printed out from ArtScroll, which does a good job. I think it's the Yuma, they have it, where they show basically the basic English. I printed out 2 pages, so there really shouldn't be a space here, but there is a space. Okay. The way we always think about this Mikdash is wrong, because we always come about it in our minds from the Kaisel. We think we're walking into the basic Mikdash. We're not walking into the basic Mikdash from the Kaisel in a normal way. When we go up from the Kaisel, we're coming in to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right behind the Kaisel is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The real entrance would be, if you imagine in your mind, coming up from the opposite end of the Har Bayis. That's the real entrance into, right over here. If you look at this picture, so here's the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right, here's the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Here would be the Kaisel Maravi, and here's the plaza where everybody's standing. Right, here's the plaza, everybody's standing. The real entrance, and today, if you go up to the Har Bayis, it's not our topic for today, you come up from the Kaisel, right? The Jewish way that they let people in, that whole Mugrabi gate thing is from here. You're going up by the Kaisel, right? Coming down. Kaisel, the retaining wall to Har Bayis, you're coming down from here and then coming inside, right? That's how you're going. Yeah, that's the basic idea. But the original entrance to the Har Bayis, the original entrance to the Beis Hamikdash was not by the Kaisel. I'm not the Kaisel. That wasn't the way you went up. The way you went up was from here. You came from the east. This is the west. This is the east, and that's how you came up. So this will be like the Aziz Nashim. This is the Azara, right? And here's the Kodesh HaKadoshim. This is the Kodesh. This is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Where is the Mizbeach? On this, there are 3. We're talking about the Mizbeach Achitzin, the Mizbeach Anachoshes. There are 3 opinions where this Mizbeach goes. One, which is what you see here, is in the south. One, which is like in the middle, Mamish Keneged the Eichal, right? Keneged the, like, to be exactly opposite. And one is that it's in the north. In the north, right? There are 3 different opinions as to where exactly it was. We're not going to be able to get into more specifics than that, but fundamentally, as we're going to see, the attempt of the Gemara here is to try to explain why it was supposed to be this mincha is brought in the southwestern corner of the Mizbeach, which would be over here. Right? The southwestern corner would be over here, according to that. Yeah? So now the Gemara is explaining. So minala on the siv is teras hamincha hakriv isach b'nei Aaron l'fnei Hashem el b'nei Mizbeach. Whenever we say something is l'fnei Hashem, we mean it's going to be as close as possible to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, as close as possible to Hashem, as it were, whatever that means. So says the Gemara, if that's true, then we would want it to be where? As close as possible to the west. right? As close as possible to the west, because that's where the Kodesh HaKadoshim is. But we also set up Pnei HaMizbeach, that it should be by the face of the Mizbeach. Now, where's the Mizbeach? Again, depends on your opinion, but the Mizbeach can either be in the south, in the middle, or in the north. Right? So we're saying in the Pasuk, Lifnei Hashem, Al Pnei HaMizbeach. So it sounds like you want it west as much as possible, and Pnei HaMizbeach, which would be, if you hold this in the south, on the south, in the north, and the middle, in the middle. Right? It's not so clear. So it says the more like this. V'tanya, we learned in a Bryce, Lifnei Hashem. It says in Pasuk that it has to be done before Hashem. Yochel b'mayriv. You would think maybe that should be in the west, because it says Lifnei Hashem. So Tamulam El Pnei HaMizbeach. That's why it says in Pasuk that it has to be done El Pnei HaMizbeach. So it shouldn't be done in the west. You have to consider the measurement of the Mizbeach as well. It says the Ma'i El Pnei HaMizbeach Yochel b'darim. You might think that since it says the Pnei HaMizbeach, that it should be in the south. Again, according to this opinion, it makes sense the way we're showing it here on this picture, because the Mizbeach is in the south. So you might think that's where it should be. So it says the Gemara, no, it shouldn't be in the south, because it says Lifnei Hashem. That means it has to be in the west. So you have a tension between it being in the west versus it being in the south. So Kate said, how is that going to be able to be managed? Magisha bekaren droimus ma'aravis keneged chuda shel karen v'dayay. What we're going to say is that the way to be mekayim shneim is that you bring it in the southwestern corner, right, opposite the corner of the mizbeach. Right, that's how you're going to be able to make efshel mekayim shneim. You're going to be able to do both, because then you get up in the mizbeach, so you have it near the Mizbeach, and you get Lifnei Hashem because it's on the west. So it could be that's how you're going to learn the Gemara according to this opinion. That's holding. I'm not 100% clear that this opinion is that the Mizbeach can't be in the middle, but for sure it's of the opinion that the Mizbeach is in the south. Maybe even if it's in the middle, it would work according to that opinion as well. As Rashi says, there's only 3 opinions, and we're about to see another opinion, and Rashi says, don't make this into a 4th opinion. There are 3 basic opinions about the Mizbeach and the Chayshis was north, middle, south, and we just want to keep those 3 opinions. We don't want to add a 4th opinion. So now we're going to see another opinion. Now, the opinion of Rabbi Lezer, which Rashi explains, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, that holds that the Mizbeach is in the north. So now let's look at the next opinion. Again, the same question, the same issue we're trying to explain. How do you get the Karban Mincha to be able to Mekayim, Lifnei Hashem, and able to be Mekayim, that it should be El Pnei HaMizbeach? Says the Gemara as follows. Rabbi Lezer says, Yachol Yagishena b'ma'arava shel keren, Elu d'rema shel keren. Rabbi Lezer said that you think you might be able to bring it to the western part of the horn, Elu d'rema shel keren, or to the southern part of the horn. In other words, the western part would be here, the southern part would be there. Maybe either that should be no problem. Now you have a choice. You can bring it wherever you want, right? Because why should you be able to bring it wherever you want? So Rashi notes that according to Rabbi Lezer, says in the pasuk Lifnei Hashem al Pnei HaMizbeach. So you have a choice. Since it says Lifnei Hashem and it says al Pnei HaMizbeach, maybe you should bring it. Rashi says Yochel Yagishen al Echad Men Rotzel Amayrav Rotzel D'Rayma. Whatever you want. You have choices. The Torah is giving you optionality. By the Torah saying Lifnei Hashem al Pnei HaMizbeach, it's telling you whatever you like. You could be yay to this, you could be yay to that. You're good either way. You go in the south, you go in the west. You don't have to worry about it. Says the Gemara. No. You have options. Amris, we say this is a principle that Rabbi wants to suggest. Whenever you have 2 psukim, one works with itself and is able to work with the other pasuk, and the other one does not work with its neighbor. In other words, if you're going to hold to this pasuk, it's binary. You hold to this pasuk, the other pasuk is not going to work. So what should you do in this situation? Don't use the pasuk that if you keep it, the other one's not going to be able to work. And instead, you should be taifus the one that works for itself and the one that works for its neighbor. That is to say, if what we call Efshel Kaim Shnei, right? My Rav Ray Brown in the Sherman Son of Malacha made the argument that he thinks maybe this is one of the sources for the idea, right? That we have a machlokes. So how do you put the mezuzah right on the door? Right, you put the mezuzah either straight, right, or you put it sideways. So we do it slanty ways, right? Because Rama says you should do ba'alachsan. Why? Right? Be able to do two things. Best to do both, or as close as possible. Obviously, you can't do it sideways and straight by doing it slanty, but it's a little bit of both. So over here, the same idea. You have two psukim. One, is able to exist with the other, and one version or one reading cannot exist with the other. Then we do it in a manner that's going to be able to do both. So how do we do it? It says it more like this. When the pasuk says that you have to do Lifnei Hashem b'mayrev, that means it has to be in the west. B'talta p'nei mizbeach b'darim, then it's not possible to do the p'nei mizbeach in the south, the face of the mizbeach in the south. However, if you say that you're doing al p'nei mizbeach in the south, then you're able to mekayim Lifnei Hashem in the west. So in other words, according to this opinion, if you do it Lifnei Hashem in the west, you don't have the Pnei Mizbeach in the south. But if you do Pnei Mizbeach in the south, you do have El Pnei Hashem in the west. So the Gemara says, okay, it said, how does this work? You bring it to the southern part of the horn. So again, according to Rebbe Lezer, it doesn't need that same kind of preciseness like the Tanakama. The Tanakama said, Ketsa Megisha Bekaren Dremis Shel Karen, right? Bekaren Dremis Maravis, you bring it by the southwestern corner, Keneged Chuda Shel Karen, right? Opposite that corner of the Karen. So he's not saying it as precise as that. Okay, so Megishal the Rebbe Shel Karen, you bring it to the southern part of the Karen. It doesn't have to be Mamish Keneged Chuda, etc., but the southern part of the horn, that's sufficient. The Gemara says, okay, one second. The southern part of the horn, that's sufficient to Mekayim El Pnei Mizbeach. I understand that. But how's that enough to do with Lifnei Hashem? Right? How's that in the west? How have you managed? In the Mandam who says Keneged Chuda Shel Mizbeach, Amish opposite the corner. So you're like already in the bit in the west. So you're a bit in the south, a bit in the west. You're sort of able to be Mekayim Shneim. But what about this? What about Rebbe Lezer? He's saying you just do it L'Derem Shel Karen in the southern part of that horn. He's not simply saying anything about the west. So how are you Mekayim Lifnei Hashem? Amar Avashi Kesavar Haitana Kulam Mizbeach Mitzaf and Koi. This one, the Amar held that the Mizbeach and Hachitzan is really in the northern part. So now imagine if we took our picture and put the Mizbeach, instead of in the south, if we put it in the north. Now you understand that the most southern place, right, of the Mizbeach would then, if it's in the north, would then be opposite the Heichal. And so you would be able to get Lifnei Hashem. So that's the understanding of why he says that it's no issue at all. The word, according to Blazer, because he holds like a Biesi, right? Because he holds like a Biesi Lili, so effectively he ends up saying that by definition, by being in the southern part of the Karen, so you Mekayim L'Pnei Mizbeach, you also be Mekayim L'Fnei Hashem because it's opposite of the Heichal. Good, that is the Gemara until here. So now the Gemara asks, "My Vidaya, what do you mean that we said, oh, this is enough, this is sufficient, you don't have to do anything else?" So it says the Gemara, Amar Avashi Isrich. We needed to teach us about I would have thought that what? I would have thought that maybe you when you're coming up to the Mizbeach, so the bringing up of the mincha, as Rashi says, will be the mincha gufa. You would like have to bring up the actual mincha, not in the kli. So the Gemara is telling us, Kamash Malon, no, you don't have to. You can bring it up in the kli; it's no problem. It says but what? Maybe it really should be read that way. I know it's easy to bring it up in the kli, but maybe it should nevertheless be brought up in sort of without the kli. It says the no. Right? You have to bring it to the kain, and the kain brings it to the mizbeach. So the same way, Mak, Rava, Eitzel Kai Mikli, Afagosh, Eitzel Mizbeach Mikli. Just like when you brought it to the Kai, you brought it in a Kli, right? That's what we said before, because you brought it Beklotza, Shal Kesef, or Shal Zav. So too, we're making like a comparison. The same way the Hakrava to the Kai is brought with a Kli, so to the Hagasha of the Kai to the Mizbeach is also done in a Kli. Okay. Now, Now says the Gemara, the next part of that Bryce, the next part of the Sefta was Masalagas Levainosal Tzad. If you remember, when you're doing the Kemitza, you do the Kemitza, make sure that the incense that's there is not being put into the Mincha, it's being pushed to the side. What was the reason it had to be pushed to the side? Says the Gemara, Ki heicha deloy tikmoitz bahadi mincha. So that shouldn't come up in the Kemitza. Okay, the Tanan, because we have a Mishnah that tells Menachas, Kamat the Allah biyadei tzrar, or gar melach, right? If you did a kemitza, and in the kemitza you have a rock, a pebble came up, or a piece of salt, right? Not the salt that you're sprinkling in, but like a block of salt, a carrot levina or a crumb of the incense, puzzle, right? Because that's not a full kemitza, as Rashi notes. It's a kaimetz chaser. You have to do a full kemitza. So you can't do a full kemitza. You're not able to be yotze. And so then, if you don't have a full community, you're not yet to the bringing of the Karm Mincha. So that's what we say. Make sure they move the Levina to the side. Obviously, then we're going to put the Levina on top. But when you do the community, there can't be any Levina in. Yeah, the Karmit Makom Shenis Rabba Shamna. You should use the Kemitza should be done in the area that has the most shemen mixed with the oil, like where it's the best. So it says the Gemara Minawan, Dechsiv mi Sotah or mi Shamna. It says in the pasuk that you should do the Karm Mincha misalta mishamna or migirsa mishamna, right? Depending on the kind of material that's being used, right? The girsa is from the barley, misalta is from the flour, but you should do it from the place where it has the shemen. So if you're just taking plain flour, it's not exactly a good mincha. You do it from the place where the oil has mixed the best with the flour. Yeah. Then is the Gemara. The nice nalatach klishares umekadsh b'klishares. The next part of the Sefta told us that you put it into klishares and you're mekadesh the what do you call it, the mincha in the klishares. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? What did we say already before? We said before that you come up from your house and you bring this mincha, the kalse shal kesef shal zav. Right, you brought it in these very nice gold or silver vessel, and you put it into a klisharis. And it's already kaddish b'klisharis. So now, what are we saying? That after the kaimetz, where you take the kaimetz from the makom shenis rab b'shamna, that there's the most oil, and then we said v'noisna, you take the kaimetz v'noisna klisharis. You take the kaimetz, right? The mincha itself, the whole carbon was in a klisharis. Now you take a kaimetz from that, and you put it in another klisharis. It's already Kaddish. Fed the Gemara. Lamali. What are you saying? You want to say that it's put into another klisharis, okay, but to say it's been Mekudesh now by putting it into the next klisharis, what are you talking about? It's already Kaddish. On that, the Gemara says, Mida the Hava Adam. You know what this is like? This is like blood. What do we mean by blood? Dam afagav de kaddish de sakim mitzaver behema. Dam, even though it's already kaddish, right? By the sakin that was used to cut the animal's throat. So hadar mekadosh lebeklisharis. Then we nevertheless still take the blood and put it into another klisharis. We mekabel the dam into another klisharis. So achanam milosh nasat over here. It was already mekudash. Obviously, the mixture was put into a klisharis initially, but nevertheless, we still use it and keep on using a klisharis with the next item on the agenda of the Karb Mincha. When we take the community, we still put into another klisharis. This line, we're not going to have a chance to, really focus on it, but it is a very controversial line. Right? Because look at Rashi. Rashi says that what does it mean that you take the sakin, the tzava behema, and because you shechted it with the klisharis, so it's already kaidish. The blood's already kaidish by the shechting, and so our point is that nevertheless the kabbalas hadam is done in the klisharis. Nevertheless, look at Rashi. I says that what does it mean? The sakin is havik klisharis. The sakin itself is a klisharis. Sakin is a klisharis. What do we know about shchita? Shchita is kshera v'zar. Right? You don't need to have special things for the shchita. Shchita is even called, it can be done by a regular person. More than that. Um, the Gemara tells us in Pesachim Sabach Vav, whole Maisa there about Hillel becoming the Nasi. So he became the Nasi because the Ben Becerra forgot some halachas, and Hillel remembered them. And so they appointed Hillel as the Nasi. And then Hillel forgot a halacha. The Gemara says that they asked him, what are we going to do? How are we going to get the knives to the Beis HaMikdash on Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbos? Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, what are we going to do? So Hillel said he didn't remember, but which was the same problem that Bnei Becerra didn't remember. Nevertheless, Hillel doesn't get deposed. He's kept on his Nasi, but Hillel gives them a solution. Hillel says, I don't remember. I know I learned it once, I don't remember. But Hanach Lan Li Yisrael, Im Einam Nevi'im B'nei Nevi'im. The Jewish people, they know how to do it. You'll see. And in fact, what happened? The next day, whatever it was, Erev Pesach, which was Shabbos, so the Jewish people came to the Beis HaMikdash to bring the karbanos. And they came with their animals, and the knives were in the wool of the animals. They were tied into the animal's wool. They were attached that way. So they weren't carrying it. It was being carried by the animal itself. Now you might say, kind of ironic, not only are they going to their destruction, but they're bringing their own destruction upon them, literally. It's true. But what is obvious in that Gemara? Everybody's bringing their own sakin. If everybody's bringing their own knife, how could you make an argument to klisharis? So that would seem to be a pretty strong proof against the idea that the sakin was not a klisharis. There are those that want to argue no, that when they came to the Mizbeach, when they came to Beis HaMikdash with their animals, that they were actually mekadesh these knives, that these knives all became klisharis in order to be able to be used. Not 100% clear, but this is a big topic as to whether or not the knife of the sheichet who's shechting the animal has to be considered a klisharis or not. If it's not a klisharis, then you have a question on this Gemara. You want to learn out that the Korban Mincha requires another klisharis because you said, oh, it has the first klisharis and it has the second klisharis just like the dam. The dam needs a klisharis to be mekabel the dam, and you had a klisharis already from the sakin. If the sakin is not a klisharis, then this Gemara is a challenge. Yeah. All right, continues the Gemara. What do you do with the levaina? You put it on top of the kemitza, right? The kemitza itself couldn't have any levaina in it, but once you did it, so then you take the levaina, you push to the side, and then you put it on top of the kemitza. So why is that? As the pasuk says that you take the levaina that was on the mincha. Continues the Gemara. Ma'aleu, you turn the page down to Tesvav and Aleph. So now, if you look there at the Sefta, it says Ma'aleu maktiroi b'klisharis. You bring it up now in the klisharis. So it says the Gemara b'klisharis maktiroi. In the klisharis, you're burning it. The question here, as Rashi notes, is not are you burning it in the klisharis as opposed to just burning it without a klisharis. That's not really the question. Question is, if you look back at the Sefta, you'll see that it said you bring it up and you maktir it in the klisharis, and then you salt it, and you put it on the coals. So what does that mean? If you burned it and you're putting in salt after you burned it, that doesn't make any sense. So the Gemara's question is, what does it mean umaktiroi? Are you saying that you're burning it? Doesn't make any sense. You didn't salt it yet. Every carbon, every carbon requires some salting. You didn't salt it at this stage. Why didn't you salt it? Because you didn't bring it yet. You're gonna salt it. That's the next stage, and then you're gonna offer it up and then burn it. So now the Gemara says, no. Bacteria here doesn't mean that he literally burned it. The same way we changed the vav before to a lamed, bad klisharis, did it mean to be makdish it we said like with intention, but meant lehakdisha will do it by itself. Sotah over here was saying also change the vav to a lamed. What we mean is that you're bringing it up in the klishares lehaktira to burn it. You're not burning it yet. We're going to the next stage. What's the next stage? Umalchai, right? And the next stage is we salt it. The knife now ishim, and we put it on top of the coals, right, to burn it. That's the next stage. And how do we know that? Because the pasuk says, "Kol kaban minchasecha b'melach timlach." Not supposed to hold back on the salt. You got to salt it. Fine. So at this stage, right, we have now the carbon mincha is brought, is burned, right? The Shemitah is burned. So now you have the next part of the Sotah said about the Shirayim, that the Shirayim are allowed to be eaten. So says the Gemara, Karva Kermitz Shirel Nechalin. Minolan, how do you know that you're allowed to eat the Shirayim? The Sib. V'hiktir HaKayin as Askara, so the Kayin burns the Askar. In other words, he burned the Kemitza. And the next part says, right? Then the remaining part, the Shirayim, is eaten by Aaron and his children. So the Gemara says a lashon here, a very nice lashon. Karavak kaimetz. The lashon of the Tosefta was you bring the kaimetz shiaran yachlim, right? Then you're able to eat the shirayim. Lemar kede islay u lemar kede islay. This could go according to either opinion. Lemar kede islay u lemar kede islay. What does that mean? That means that it could go according to any approach that you like, because we have machlekes. The machlekes says again, the more menachas the idmar akremetz me'emasai matu shirayim b'achila. When is it mutter, right, to eat the shirayim, right? It's not when the Rebbe gives it to you, right? When the Rebbe nods to you, then you could eat it, right? Just to eat it without him saying it's okay to eat it, it's not, right? So the machlekes. When is it exactly mutter to eat the shirayim? So according to Chanina, you're allowed to eat the shirayim once the fire started. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it had to be burnt. Beruba, it has to be majority burned before the shirayim are going to be mutter. The practical implications of this is obviously when the kohen's going to start eating. Karb mincha, it's a very small amount. It's chamitza. It's a difference of a few seconds, nevertheless. This could go then according to both opinions, because we just said karv hakaimitz. You bring the kaimitz. We're not saying how much of a hakrava there has to be. So it can go according to Adam and the Amar. Fine. Then the next part of the Sefta told us what they can add in there any kind of mixture to make it taste a little better. Right now it's just flour and oil, right? But they want to add in some wine or some other oil or maybe honey. Like they can add in things. Says them are my time. Why is it that they're allowed to be adding in things and making it taste in a better way that they like? Right? The pasuk says lamashcha b'hem l'mali v'mes yadam. What does it mean lamashcha? The Gemara says in Chulin l'kuflam base legedula keder asher malachim leichlan. They're allowed to eat a legedula the way that the kings eat it. Now, lamashcha, we discussed it on a chumash here on Thursday night. I don't know, a year ago, maybe, whatever it was. Now, what does it mean lamashcha b'hem? Oh, I discussed it in Shabbos Hagadol. 2 years ago. Not this year, the year before, yeah. We discussed it in the context of mar. So most people understand that why are you eating mar? Why are you eating mar by the carbon Pesach? You're eating it because right? So you're supposed to say the reason you're eating mar is because to remember the terrible times. So Chaim is a beautiful idea. And the beautiful idea is that we have the Gemara tells us in Chulin about lamashcha b'hem. So the more of their darshans, lamashcha b'hem, they have to eat it roasted, fully, the way the royal people they would eat it. You have to eat it with chardal. You have to eat it with mustard, very spicy. That's the fancy way to eat it. So the word lamashcha b'hem, the Archaim wanted to suggest, could explain a different reason for eating the maror. The maror is not just a zikaron for the terrible time, but here you're eating kachim. And what do we know that the kahana when they eat kachim? They eat a lamashcha b'hem, the gdula in a keder shamalachim eichlen. So we're sitting down, eating the Korban Pesach. There may be an element that Aracham wanted to suggest of Lamashch Bahem. He's supposed to eat in a royal way. The royalty would eat the meat with, they have a sweet and sour, a hot and spicy, whatever different kind of a thing. So you put a chardal. So we put a mar. That's like the chardal to make it a dignified, kingly way, sophisticated way of being able to eat. That was his taina. Another aspect of Lamashal comes up very interesting here in the Piskei Tesis brings down. It's a very interesting discussion because we know the Tesis says in Yuma Chafei that they, although we know it's true that the kings are only able to sit in the Azar, no one else is allowed to sit in the Azar, but because you have to eat Lamashal and you have to do it the way the kings are doing it. So over here, maybe you should be able to eat sitting. Maybe you should be able to eat this carbon sitting. The biscuit taste in the back here says no, you can't. It has to be standing. You have no head to eat. Now, normally we say that if you're not supposed to stand and eat, you're supposed to sit and eat. But for kachim, you have to eat it in the azar. You can't go out. So how do you eat it? Do you eat it kadesh malachim, which would be sitting because they're the only ones allowed to sit in the azar, or not? Do you stand and eat? All right, continues the Gemara. So the ain oisin elam milachametz. The chsev loisi afay chametz. We said the one thing that was also that Tosefta said is not allowed to make it chametz. Why? Because the pasuk says loisi afay chametz chelkam. Right? You're not able to make. We said there's a few exceptions, but the what do you call the regular lachma panim, the regular lachma, most of the lachma taida, these are all not chametz. The Amar Shimon Lakish, afilu chelkam loisi afay chametz. Even the actual chelek cannot be made chametz. Even the actual chelik of the mincha that they're eating, right? Lo yisayaf chametz chelkam afilu chelkam lo yisayaf chametz. He plays on the pasuk, right? Even their chelik that they're eating, they cannot do chametz. Then is the Tosefta. We said kol menachos, right? So we said that it's not able to be chametz. So now, I'm sorry, we've done now all the Tosefta. So now we're saying going back. So we said in our mission that all the menachos are tu'unin, shemen, and levina. Says the Gemara, is it true that really all the carbon minchas require shemen and levina? Don't we have the mincha of somebody who's doing a chatas, he can't afford a carbon, an animal, so he brings a mincha. The Rachmana Amar lo yasam la shemen v'lo yitain la levina. Doesn't the pasuk say that you don't put on shemen and levina because it's a chatas? Says the Gemara, this is what we're trying to teach you. Kol minchas to unais shemen ulevina, uvayas menachitin, uvayas soilas. All carbon minchas require shemen ulevina, and they come from wheat, and they come from nice flour. However, the minchas chayte, afachish ena to unais shemen ulevina, mincha of a chayte, even though it doesn't require shemen ulevina, it's still ba menachitin and ba soilas. It still has to come from chitin, and it still has to be the very nice flour. Mincha ta'omer. What about the mincha of the omer, right? That is brought from barley. So that's not brought from wheat. Even though it's coming from barley and not from the wheat, to una shemen levina, it comes from shemen and levina. You have to bring with it, right? Because it's not a chayta, it's not nothing with a chatas. Uba geras. Geras is like silas. It's like the really nice refined barley. The zoo, but this mincha of this woman, the Sotah, Eina Tu'una loy shemen v'loy levina. She doesn't require not shemen and levina, right? Because it's like potentially a chatas, right? It's a negative. Uba minasai. I mean, it comes from bar, which is very the lower level. Uba kamach. It doesn't come selis. It comes kamach. It doesn't come geres, which is the version in barley. It comes kamach, which is a weaker version, not so refined barley. Why? All to hint that this is basically very animalistic. A very low level that this woman acted. Here's the Gemara. Tanya Amar of Shimon Bedin. Who should say minchas chayta tu and shemen levina shleiyeh chayta niska? Really, the halacha should be that the chayta requires for his mincha shemen levina. Why? Because that's going to be a chayta niska, right? He's going to be getting away cheap. He doesn't have to pay for the shemen levina. So why is it that we're not requiring it? We're letting it be chayta niskar. We don't want him to be such a beautiful carbon. It's true, it's a chayta niskar. He's going to get away with not having to pay for the oil, not having to pay for the levina. But nevertheless, that's better. That's better than him bringing a carbon mahudar. He should know he's a chayta. He should not bring a nice carbon. And it's Gemara continues within it's true that the chatas that is being brought for sin that was a chi of curse, like someone was any chayla by mistake, so that you really have nesachim that are brought with the carbon. Again, it'll be cheap by you getting away not having to bring nesachim. Why is it not requiring nesachim? We don't have a nice carbon. What about the chatas and of the Mitzayra and his carbon asham to unan nesachim? What over there? They do require nesachim. For the Gemara, because that's not coming for a chet. Says the Gemara, what? What do we know about a Mitzayra? How did he get tzaras? Says the Gemara, right? The Gemara told us there that the 7 different things that Negoim come from. One of them famously is Lashon Hara. So what do you mean it's not coming for a chet? It is coming for a chet. That's how he became a Mitzayra. Says the Gemara, Hasam Negia who the Ichbarla. He already got forgiveness. He already has the kapar from the actual Negat Saras. So the Chatas is not bringing him the kapar. He has the kapar from the Negat Saras. So what then is the carbon doing? The reason he's bringing the carbon chatas is only to mechaper him on the ability to eat kachin, but his kapara, he already got that kapara from having the tzaras. The tzaras brought him kapara, so therefore we're going to bring this carbon of the chatas of the mitzayra has to be with shem. It has to be with nesach. Says the Gemara. Elamayata. What about a chatas nazir? What about the chatas of a nazir? Right, the nazir tehena suchim tehena nesachim. That should require nesachim. The chatas of the nazir. Why? Because the chatas of a nazir is not coming for a chet. The chatas of a nazir, did he sin? Right, this reminds us of the Gemara in Tainus Yud Aleph that we had. Is it a sin? The nazir sin? We're talking about the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchos Deis. The nazir didn't sin. We learned it from the Yerushalmi, and others want to say he did. Over there was a machlokes in the Gemara there. Blazer Kapper said that the nazir is a sinner. Why? Because he was Yazer Atzman Hayayim by taking himself away from why he sinned. Says the Gemara, El Me'at the Chatas Noten is doing the Sakim. The Chatas of Nazir requiring a Sakim. Vishaina Balachet, he didn't do anything wrong. Savar Locker, Blazer Kapper, Damar Nazir Nami Chaitu. We hold like a Blazer Kapper who holds that just being Yazer Atzman Hayayim, that's itself a Chet. To be taking yourself away from something that Hashem permitted you. That itself is a chet. Remember, that is a machlekes there in the Gemara. If a nazir is a kodesh, right, according to the Ramban, a nazir is a chet. Every time the nazir stops being a nazir, is a chet. Because what's the chet? Says the Ramban, he should have been a nazir la'olam. All right, let's stop over here.